Hello, everyone. Welcome to Commander's Pod. My name is Duncan. I'm joined by Sloan and Jeff.
Hello.
Hey.
Thank you for joining us today. Today, we have a couple things we're going to go over. We're going to talk about the end step and what that means. We're going to talk about molding your meta. How do you cultivate that group you're playing with? How do you all get on the same page? How do you decide power levels? Things like that. We're going to have some pro tips for beginners. But first, how about a tale from the table? Sloan, do you have anything?
Yeah, I got one this week. So I was in a game recently, a couple weeks ago, with Duncan and a couple other guys out at the shop. And the table, we had an issue, and it was Duncan. And so I had a card out that was locking down Duncan's commander, keeping him from being able to basically flip over and do a bunch of nasty things and pretty much win the game. And so I had this card out there. Well, the player to my left decided, well, I'm going to destroy it. And I said, well, I hope you can deal with Duncan. He goes, yeah, I got something. He doesn't do anything. He then passes his turn, and then Duncan wins on his turn. And I was like, I thought you had something. He goes like, oh, I couldn't do it that turn. I was like, cool. And that's how the game, it was awful.
I mean, that is a great story. That's probably one of the best tales from the table I've heard.
Yeah.
It ends with, I won.
Yeah, exactly. So just be mindful if someone has something out there that might be hurting you.
So this has to do with a subject we've talked about in the past, and that's with being patient.
Right.
Number one, don't do things just because you can.
Right.
And something can be really annoying, but you have to look at, is it stopping you right now from winning, and or is it stopping somebody else more than it's stopping you?
Yeah.
And this is something you run into a lot with stacks players.
Yep.
Stacks players can be really annoying. However, once it's started, you sometimes have to keep it going because it's stopping everybody. And if you waste your resources on getting rid of it, you may be then opening them up to win or
Go
take
off.
over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to have good threat assessment. And
Right.
this is where other people will have opinions. Like, let's say I destroy this thing that's
Right.
keeping him from going off. The key part of that is that the guy who destroyed it didn't do anything.
Right.
Right? So if I think that I can remove this and let Duncan be a problem for everybody else, but somehow he's not a problem for me,
Right.
that can make all the other players think that I'm not assessing correctly, but they don't know what I have, right?
Right.
And then you very, very well may win that game. So, but you do have to have a follow up. You have to be able to deal with the person. You
Do
cannot
not
just
remove something just because it's annoying and you can.
Yeah.
Right.
And I will
Look at should you.
Yeah.
That is a very important question a lot of players don't ask. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I want to do this. Should I do this is the most important.
Right.
question.
And I will
and
say,
if it doesn't hurt you to remove, if it's just annoying and it doesn't hurt you to remove it, but it hurts the person who's playing it, like they're slowing everybody else down because they're playing the long game, you might remove it, but then you should. That's a should, and not everybody may agree with you, but
yeah, I mean, I
That's
will.
the game.
The other thing too was there was nothing on that player's board state that was being affected by the thing I had out, nor was it slowing down anything that they were doing
it's ridiculous.
in any way, shape,
Okay.
or form.
Well,
but they still
other
killed
problem
it. I was
you'll
like,
see though. So you did the right thing. You said, "Hey, you know this is stopping."
yeah,
him,
and I
right?
did. And Doug was there. I pleaded with the guys like, just so you know, if you get rid of this, Duncan is going to win on his turn. It's not a he might. No, it is he will win on his turn if you remove this and you don't have something to answer.
Well, but what you'll find is somebody, their pride will get in the way, and even though you said that,
Doesn't
it's
matter.
like, oh, I meant to do that.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
no,
I meant to have Duncan
Have
win.
discipline,
yeah.
folks. Have
So
discipline.
you do run into that. So try and just, if you're that player, don't let your pride get in the way. But don't be
Right.
afraid to say, oh, you know what, you're right. I will take that back. I'm sorry.
But there
Right.
are moments too when we get into nuance, which we got to talk about this more, but where it benefits you to let the other player be winning. Okay? So
Yeah, that
like if
happens.
there's something out that's stopping you from being the threat, it's not going to win you the game. But if I remove it, you're no longer the threat. Or while it's there, you're no longer the threat. If I remove it, now you're the threat. I might remove it so that you stay the threat. And then everybody's dealing with you, and I get to do what I want to do. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into it, but think it out. Make
Right.
sure you know what you're doing.
and,
Have a
and
plan.
I would say that's more of an advanced player thing.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
For newer players or moderate level players and under, I would say don't try it until you're absolutely certain
Well,
that you're going to benefit.
if you
from
want
it.
to get really good at things like that, play chess, remove all the pieces but the pawns. Learn how to play with the pawns because they're what you're going to sacrifice to win the game. You get really good at being able to do that, knowing what to sacrifice your chance to win is what it seems like for a better chance to win. So get good at that. You can practice being better at strategy and Magic by playing other games.
Yeah, and I will say too, a couple episodes ago we talked about threat assessment, and one of the things that we said is this going to win that person the game, or is this going to prevent me from winning the game? And if a lot of times if it's not the latter of those two keeping you from winning the game, like Jeff said, sometimes let it ride. Like let that other person be the threat.
If they're
so
not
you can
going to
do
win
something.
because of it, and you're not going to lose because of it, or stop you from winning,
yeah,
let
So-
somebody else's resources deal with it.
right.
And
So
that's something that I think many players should just practice not doing things.
Yeah. Save your here's a great rule of thumb. Save your card, use your words.
yeah.
So you can save your card that will deal with that and use your words to point the threat out. Let other people deal with it.
Well, right, if it's a threat. But in this assessment, it was not a threat. It was
It was-
something
it was
stopping
an
the threat.
anti-threat. I
he
was
was
the
trying
hero.
to use his words
And-
to get him to deal with you, the threat.
And
right,
talking about
yeah.
the pride thing, I have been in games where I have said, no, this guy's right. I don't think I said that.
No, he didn't because he was trying to win because he was just playing his new gen taxis that he got. He wanted to win and flip him over.
But I have said in the
vomit
past, no,
cards.
he's 100% right. I'm going to
Yeah.
win if you do this, don't do this. And the player will still do it.
Well, you
That's-
need to play with different people.
Well,
Because
I play with a lot.
I
of
would be
different
really I would not play with that person again. I'd be real annoyed.
oh my
people.
goodness.
But yeah, so I like that one.
yeah. So yeah, just please.
So now we're going to do our segment called Counterspell. It's a topic where we kind of have some back and forth, and maybe we're on different sides of things.
Hopefully.
yes.
But I think this one will be because I
Good.
think it's very subjective. When should you stifle, or should you stifle a fetch, or when should you counter someone's soul ring?
Always.
yeah.
Because
Always.
even when it's not optimal, it's funny.
Okay, but to your point earlier, what if you do that? Haha, it's very funny.
And then someone else-
somebody else drops Stas's Oracle win.
I mean, look, you have to know your
Yeah,
meta.
stop
If you're
laughing.
playing with people who are going to do that type of stuff, then yeah, you have to decide what meta people are playing in. If it's high combo, if it's really giant threats,
I would say
Maybe
I
you
would
don't do
say
that, but-
there's definitely a time and a place to do it. The stifling the fetch land is just pure spiteful. Like that is
Yeah.
like you don't want that person
That's
to
just-
enjoy this game
that's-
because they just lost a land and have nothing. Especially if you do that
Turn
turn
one,
one,
baby.
Oh my gosh, I would scoop. I don't have anything to scoop because I don't have anything on the board anymore. I'd be so sad.
Duncan
like,
has done it.
sadness would be on the stack.
Duncan has done it twice to me.
Oh, that's
where
so
he's
great,
done
though.
that.
See, when it happened, when you say it happened to you, that makes me so happy though. I don't know why.
It
But
made me
does.
happy too. When he did it, I thought it was hilarious.
Right.
I think I still won both those
So
games too.
here's my answer to that question,
Okay.
and I
Yeah.
think I get the most glee out of doing it.
Yeah.
But I do it if a player is the type who you know their play style, you know their deck, and if they get ahead, like it's hard to stop them.
Yeah.
Stop them before they get ahead.
Yeah, and it's with Soul Ring, you have to understand how powerful Soul Ring is. It moves you
Right.
ahead 2 turns. So if you're going to spend a stifle to do that, what you have to understand is if you're playing in a pod of 3 people, 4 people, or 5 people, that comes into the equation. Because if
Right.
you got 5 people in the pod you're playing in, you went down a card and the other guy went down a card, and everybody else is fine. So all you did was put the 2 of you at disadvantage. So that's where the strategy comes into play is like, is it optimal for me to be at disadvantage with this guy or for this guy to just be 2 ahead and be the target? Because as soon as he plays that Soul Ring, now he's out in front and he's the target of everyone. So you do have to think about those things. And what Duncan said is true too, depending on what commander, if they're playing Voltron or something like that, where getting that out quickly and slowing it down is important,
Yeah.
you probably want to do that.
Yeah, I would say too, because the other thing is, like you mentioned before, the meta. So if you're playing in a lot of high-powered tier decks at your table, at your pod, like for example, there's some decks that are pulled out at the shop that I play against with Duncan, and they're borderline CDH or on the lower cusp of CDH. I'd say there's one deck that the guy drops one land, drops a mana crypt, drops a Mox Opal, drops a Soul Ring, casts his commander turn 1. Like, in that instance, if you have a way to stop that, do it. Like, you need to stop it because that is gross.
Yeah,
and that
no,
is
for sure. If they're trying to cast their commander with what they're doing,
right. Like, I mean,
turn one, a commander doesn't cost 1. You know, we're talking about somebody who costs 3, 4,
yeah,
5.
obviously we're talking about these higher power commanders. You know, someone throwing out a Jeweled Lotus turn 1 and stifling a Jeweled
Stop
Lotus.
that, yep.
Stifle a Jeweled Lotus would be great.
Well,
you know,
can't stifle.
You can't
a duel.
stifle. You have to counter it.
yeah, counter it, or you could do something of that nature where or the stacks that can't cast zero
I
cost
actually
stuff,
did one last night that I think not many people play it, but there's a spell called Drain Power, and if they sack their Jeweled Lotus, steal their mana. You can steal it right out of their mana pool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that could work.
Unless they have something to use at instant speed to use that mana, there's nothing they can do about it.
Yeah. So I definitely think that, doing that is one way you could get the stifle and counter thumbs up.
Right.
if someone's trying to go off on turn 1 or 2, I don't think anyone's going to be like, dude, that was a dirtbag move. I think they'll be like, thank God.
And I'll tell you when
So-
you don't do it. You don't do it when somebody obviously played a 2-land hand and they're struggling to get mana and they finally get a fetch. Do not stifle their fetch.
I don't know, man. That's a tough one
That's not
because
a
they
tough
kind of
one.
did it to themselves.
They did, but you're
And
now going to waste your
lit-
resource to just keep your foot
well,
on their throat.
but you might take them out of the game completely. I've done stuff like that to Johnny before. I'm sure Johnny enjoys it. Like when he's low on
Yeah.
lands, I can just take an entire player out of the equation if I cut him off from lands.
I don't
he's
think
done
that's
it to
always the
himself.
right answer, though, because what happens when you do that is the other players, okay, he's out of it. Doesn't scoop. Let's
Yep.
assume in this instance he doesn't scoop. They say, okay, he's out of it. So now it's a 3-player game, and you guys are going whatever happens. Now a player goes out. By the time that another player goes out, the guy who you did that to probably has been able to come back into the game, number 1. Number 2, there's other instances where not having that third threat at the table is going to allow another player to go ahead.
Well, that's why it's threat assessment. You have to look at what he's playing. If he's playing Eureka, right? That's a problem. So it all depends.
If
That's
he's playing
why none of
Eureka,
these
he only needs
answers,
2 lands.
guys.
Dang
None of,
right,
So
baby.
get rid of all the rest.
none of these,
Come at me. I
none
don't
of
care.
these answers are
100%.
an answer for everything.
Right.
But they're just different ideas of thinking through something and what's going on. And in this case, there are times I think to do that. There are times not to do that. Like I'd say if someone's a new player and they're playing a low-powered deck, that's when I would say absolutely do not do that. It's not going to be fun for them.
You do
They're
not
not going to
ever do this
understand
to a
it.
new player.
Yeah.
Unless they sit down with a CEDH Urza deck or something,
Yeah, stifle the crap out of them.
Yeah, but maybe even then they're a new player. Okay,
If
let
you're a
them,
new player,
let them go
you
off.
should not come to a table with a C unless it's a
But they
CEDH
don't
table.
know, so let them go off. Let them have fun. After the game, sit down and talk with them and
Well,
go.
it's the type of
hey,
thing-
you did your cool thing. Can I explain to you sort of how people are going to feel about what
you
you're
bring
doing?
that up turn 0 and you say, is that the only deck you have? Because that is CEDH. That is not the power level we're playing.
If you have a chance to do that, yes. If you have a chance to do that, but if
Right.
for some reason you sit down, you didn't pay attention, and all of a sudden you're like, oh crap, that guy's playing. But
Sure.
the other thing is, if you are a player who's played a while and someone does this to you, please do not whine and cry like a baby. Laugh about it, have fun, move on. This is not real life.
Get better friends.
Don't get your value from playing Magic.
But I will tell you, I have made multiple players scoop by a turn 1 fetch stifle.
Good, you won. Great move. You took an entire player out with one
Yeah,
card.
I agree.
I mean, shame on them for giving up so quickly, but well done on you.
There are a couple people at the shop. It's funny you say it because the last time when I was playing, there's a couple people at the shop that don't play against control Magic decks because they're like, I don't want you touching my stuff, and so
What?
they'll just scoop if you play a control deck, they'll just scoop. They
Yeah.
won't play.
No, that happens a lot, especially when you travel to conventions.
That's wild.
Well, you got to think about some of these
Yeah,
guys
some
are
of them
playing
are
with cards
expensive.
that are $300-$400.
Which I get, but one guy said something there last week, and I was like, that seems really petty. And he goes like, if you want to play my cards, go buy them yourself. You can't play my cards.
Well,
on
here's my
deck."
thing.
I'm like,
He
"What?"
scooped. Like
Yeah.
Jeff said,
Yeah, he
good
scooped.
on you. You scooped.
He
Thank
scooped.
you. That was the most powerful
was-
control spell I've ever played.
Yeah, it was so funny.
Yeah,
I
it
was
was
sitting
the
there, I
card
heard it, and I was
read
like,
counter spell remove player from game.
yeah. So, but I will.
Who
Yeah, I will
wouldn't
say
pay 2 for that?
Yeah, there's definitely times where countering a Soul Ring or or an arcane signet or a mox opal or something like that. It definitely needs to be done. I think there's definitely times for it to happen, but yeah, I mean, talk to your group too. Make sure you're not just doing it for the sake of being salty. Like we talked about, don't just build a land destruction deck and blow everybody's lands just because you think it's hilarious. Like
No one should be salty about the stifling the lands. One thing, someone could probably be salty about that. Sol Ring's the most powerful game in the card in Commander, probably, or at least it's in discussion for it. If you're countering that or stopping that, no one should be upset. That just makes sense.
So
right.
I think we're all in agreement. It can be used. I
Yeah.
think Jeff is the most liberal. I'm probably more in the medium. And
I would say
Yeah,
I'm
you're
more
the
medium.
one who's done it the most.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
so-
you say it's always acceptable, and I don't do it always.
No, it's hilarious though. You've done it to me
Okay,
twice.
would you use Force of Will to counter somebody's Soul Ring turn 1? You haven't gone yet.
So I'm giving up 2 cards now.
Yeah.
It depends on what deck they're playing. It depends. It really
Depends
depends.
what other card you're giving up, I suppose.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. But no, because it's still card advantage. Hopefully, it's a good card. Why isn't my deck if it's not a
Well,
good card?
It may be a good card, but maybe
Well,
a
maybe it's
card you're
8 mana.
willing to sacrifice.
Yeah, maybe it's 8 mana or
Yeah,
something. I
maybe
can't
it's like
play
an
it for a
endgame
while.
card and you have in your
And I
opening
have
hand.
enough card draw. If I have enough card draw in my hand, it's an 8 mana card. I can't play it for a while, and they have a really good deck. Then probably I would. But it's really tough to go down 2 cards in the beginning of the game.
I think you should pact a negation. That'll really show them on turn 1 that
Hey,
you are not letting
Go
that
out on your
stand.
own terms.
yeah,
That's all I got to say.
yeah.
So, but anyway, so that's where we stand. Some of you may be like, you do that. That is just rude. But each to each their own. It's going to also depend on your power level you're playing at,
Yeah.
and how nice your friends are.
Yeah. If they're real sensitive and they're gonna get upset, then probably don't do it.
Right. So we're going to move on to That Doesn't Do What You Think It Does, the section where we talk about cards or abilities or whatever that you may think you know what it does, but maybe there's some points of it that you're missing. So today we're talking about the end step. And so this actually came up last episode. Sloan, being new to Obeka, didn't know that if you
Right.
end the turn, you still have to clean up.
Yeah.
So the end step has different steps, so to speak, and how you respond to it changes how that affects the player.
Well, the thing I don't understand is I know your mom. I know she taught you to clean up when you're done. So I don't understand how you
I know how
have-
to clean up. That's for sure.
He just doesn't want to.
I just don't want to.
But cleanup step is actually a different step altogether than your end step. It is after your end step. So even if you skip to your end step, you still have to do cleanup. If a permanent enters during the end step that triggers a beginning that says at the beginning of the next end step, that won't trigger till the next end step begins, depending on how it's worded, the next player's end step or your next end step. And if you respond to somebody before they actually begin their end step, so you want, let's say they have something that does at the beginning of the end step and you don't want that to trigger, if you try and respond to that before it triggers, then it is not their end step. It is them trying to move from their second main to their end step.
and it pushes it back
And
to second
now that
main.
pushes them back, and now they can cast sorceries again
That's
after
right.
your thing resolves.
Yep.
Correct.
So that is something to consider when you're doing this.
Yep.
So I think we've all been in situations where it's tough to pick where do you respond, because you don't want that ability to trigger, but if you don't, they get to go back to their second main.
I will say it was a lot easier when we didn't know how to play to respond
Oh,
to
yeah.
things.
Ignorance
Because
is
you just
bliss.
do them wrong, and everyone's like, "Yeah, that works that way." That's
I mean,
fine.
and if you're in the right group and you're still trying to learn this, it's probably easy now too. Just you're probably going to have someone say, "Hey, by the way, we need to reverse this a little bit. If this is what you're trying to do, you needed to do it in this phase
Right.
so that this happened."
Or in this
rather than
order.
just going, "I got you. You did it wrong, dummy." You know,
Right.
like that's
Right.
sort of
And
petty.
we all are very guilty of a lot of things that we talk about. That's one of the reasons why Duncan talks about this section and we have it in our show, is because we have been playing for 10-ish years now,
Yeah.
I'm going to say, give or take. And we all started off in Commander, like a lot of other people, not knowing anything about it.
And we still
And
know
we've grown.
very
Yeah, and
little.
we still know very little, despite the fact we talk about rules all the time. And instances.
Yeah.
We still don't know that much. So don't
We're just
feel
three
like,
dudes who like this game that are sitting here talking to you about what we think we know. But I wouldn't be surprised if like a bunch of the stuff we say is not actually correct from time to time.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is too, they'll probably change rulings that will
So
make us wrong.
I play with guys who have played in the pro tournaments.
Yeah.
I play with guys that have done pro tournaments. I play with judges.
Yeah.
Yep.
I play with guys that have been playing 25 years plus. And almost every night I play, there is something that comes up. And people are like, wow, didn't expect that. Didn't know that. Didn't think it worked that way.
Right.
You know, and it's truly humbling because there is no one, I think, that can just sit down and play and know absolutely all the rules. Even the judges.
There probably are. There might be some pros.
There's too many interactions. This is too complicated. Even the judges, the most seasoned judges, have things come up, and they're like, "Hold on, I got to look up this ruling. Now I got to look up this ruling. I got to see how those interact."
Yeah, and especially
wild.
as they add mechanics, obviously, and then you have to go back and see how those interactions happen with older rules.
Sure.
and
That's why
older-
just be humble. Like,
Yeah.
if someone else makes a mistake and doesn't know something, just help them, because you're going to be in a moment where you make a mistake
Right.
and you don't know what to do.
And always go
So-
into things assuming that you may be wrong.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you go into that and somebody suggests something different, it's like, okay, I think I'm right, but I may be wrong.
Right.
Let's look it up. Let's figure it out. Let's ask the judge, whatever it is. Don't get salty about it. I mean, it can be really frustrating if you're built a deck around something and then you find out it doesn't work the way you think. it
Let
works.
people finish their sentences though too in those circumstances.
don't wanna do that.
What's going to happen is, they're going to say, "I want to explain to you why I think I'm right," and you're going to say, "Can we just look it up?" Right? Let them explain it however they want. They're going to need time to talk, and they go, "That's great." Don't say, "Now I want to look it up." Say, "Okay, do you mind if I just confirm that?" I mean, that makes sense, but can I confirm it?
What do you do if they say, yes, I mind?
Okay, then you just let the game go because it doesn't matter.
That's-
At the
I
end of the
mean-
day, causing a fight or dealing with someone who's that unreasonable is not worth it.
Yeah,
Just
I mean, you can always just
lose
make
the
another
game
pod.
and play with someone else. Because if someone's unwilling to let you even look it up for 10 seconds because they know they're that right, that's a fairly stubborn person. Like, there's no point arguing with that.
Yeah,
Just-
and
it's not worth
hopefully-
it.
Hopefully, your LGS, your local game shop, actually has a judge in it. I know the one that we go to, I think, has one or two.
They have one.
They have one,
And then they have a guy who guests judges sometimes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then I know that there's the one up in Sarasota. Also, I think there's a guy there that's a judge.
I think they have like 3.
Yeah, they have a couple. So
Yeah,
you know,
it's a little bigger story.
yeah. So hopefully, your LGS does have somebody there that can be there to be the mediator and just come over and be the outside perspective that has no dog in the race,
Yep.
as it were. And so that's another good way to resolve that issue too. Is be like, hey, I think there's a judge here. Can we just double check with him real quick? Then if that person says no, they mind, finish the game, shake their hand if they want to, and then go find another pod. I'd say because that's kind of hard to deal with. But yeah, hopefully you're understanding that. Again, Jeff said it. This is a game. We're supposed to be doing this to have fun and enjoy time.
Well, and in Commander, you're going to have 2 other people at the table that are going to have a say. It's fine for you to say, well, we're going to let this happen. But if 3 players agree that you're wrong, you don't really have a choice. Those 3 players are going to say you're wrong, and you're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
And then at that point, if you really felt strongly, you can move on, or you can go look it up.
Yeah.
whatever you
Or
wanna do.
and you can go look it up just for yourself. And it's probably not going to be of value to go back and say, "Oh, I told you so," because that's not gonna build friends and influence people. So just
Then why do you always do it to me? Huh?
because you're like family, so
Oh, okay.
you're in a different realm, buddy. I'm gonna shove it in your face.
I don't get
because
the same
that's-
kindness as friends do.
Like, "I told you so" is just part of the equation with family, right?
Right. So anyway, that's how that works, the end step, and how the different parts of it work. During cleanup, obviously, you have to discard down to hand size.
Yep.
There is no way to avoid that other than having no maximum hand size.
Yes,
Right.
sir.
Yep. But
Reliquary Tower,
we're going to move on to our main topic today, and that's talking about metas or pods. How do you...
which we've already talked about a little bit. To be honest
we've
with
gotten
you,
into it. I mean, that's
We
pretty
talk
much
about it
what
almost
this is
every
about.
episode.
Yeah, that's
because
pretty
this
much
is
what
the most
about.
complicated game in the world,
Yes.
Yep.
and you're playing with the most complicated thing in the world, which is people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True story. But so how do you all decide? Let's say you're trying to get a group together. You're trying
Yeah.
to play. You found some people that are willing to put up with you for a couple hours to play some Magic games. How do you all come up with your play style for your meta? How do you come up with your power level?
Yeah, I mean that's hard because, like we talked about when we were referring to maybe CEDH and what's EDH and CEDH, and it's hard to kind of define a line. I think a good way of doing it is, I mean, I guess it would be kind of just based off of you kind of find an idea of what you want to play and you bring it up, and then I would try to keep away from doing a bunch of infinite combos and trying to do a bunch of super duper fast mana and everything, because when you start doing that, it pushes it towards that CDH realm. So I would say if you're going to build a deck and you're trying to figure out, hey, where are we trying to play at? There's everything from jank decks where they're kind of just silly and you just kind of put them together based off of weird reasoning or tribals, and then typals, whatever you want to call them. From
Kindred.
they have a chair in all of the pictures of the cards, for the creatures. They all have to have a chair in the picture somewhere in order for it to be in a deck.
I think the safest thing to do is to understand that you're dealing with people ultimately.
Mm-hmm.
So you ask questions and you listen. And those are, if you come into any of these discussions with that mindset where I'm going to ask questions and I'm going to listen, I'm going to be open to listening to what they have to say, you will probably avoid a lot of pitfalls. We didn't do it perfectly. We struggled through it. Land destruction was a real challenge for us. The arms race was a challenge for us as a group of people playing. And there were some conversations where we had to say, hey, please don't play that deck again. And we had to explain why. Like, you might really enjoy that deck, but no one else does. Like, that's just not fun. It's not actually a game. You're just playing solitaire. We never had a chance.
Right.
So just come at it with that mindset.
Right.
Be
So you're going to
listening.
have discussions in the beginning, right? You're going to talk about, I'm going to build this, and I'm going to build this, or I'm going to play this precon, whatever it is. And if any of you know enough to be like, okay, well, this one might not match up against that one, you have those discussions, talk about how you can make them better, evenly matched, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times you're not going to know till you play.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So in my opinion, sit down, play a couple games. And don't assume the first game is going to give you a good indicator. They may get lucky and get a just perfect hand.
Yeah, the nut draw.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that may skew how that game goes.
Yeah.
Play a couple. Give it even if it was brutal, you got pounded on, give it a couple more games, at least one more. If it happens again, then you say, okay, I'm seeing a difference here in our power levels. How do we fix this? And so since there's 4 of you, you're going to want to come to the average.
Yeah.
You're going to want to, if there's 3 of you that were underpowered and one that was definitely overpowered, unless you're all like, we all want to do what he did, you're probably going to have to ask that player to tone his deck down.
Right.
Yeah, and it's good for people to sort of appeal to a greater source. So, like, if you guys are if your group is having trouble trying to figure out what the rules are supposed to be on certain things, find a trusted source. So, like, if there's a podcast you listen to that gives some rules, or find a website that you might respect that has editors and writers that sort of write on the content you're thinking about, and appeal to them. Especially if you happen to have some people in your group that might be a little unreasonable, like, I don't ever want to play a deck that has interaction. Well, you can argue with that person if you want, but maybe encourage them to go listen to a podcast and hear someone make a coherent argument from beginning to end.
Well, you also
and encourage that.
In that instance, I think the answer would be you tell them, hey, that is your choice. What I feel like is going to happen is you are going to be overpowered because other people will have removal and you won't have things to answer their stuff. But if you want to try it.
Well, no, this is the person that says, I won't play your deck because it has removal.
Oh,
and it's like, yeah, well, then you're really just going to say, well, then how do you play with us? Because we have removal. Like, it doesn't work. But the other thing too is, like, just sort of be a peacemaker too, the best you can, because at the end of the day, you're better off having a good time than you are, like, really doing what you want. I don't know if that makes sense, but, like,
no, I hear
if
you.
someone's offended by something in your deck, just take it out.
Well,
like,
I think
what's
you're
the big
discounting
deal?
the fact, though, there are going to be 2 other people besides you and that person.
Right.
If the other 2 also say, no, we don't want removal, guess what? You're the odd guy out. And you have to respect that. That's how they want to play. You either have to join or step away.
No, that's 100%
Yeah.
true.
I mean, and I think too, like, there's, like you said, when you're looking and you're sitting down and you're playing and you're like, man, it'd be really great if my deck was as fast as everyone else's deck or as strong as everyone else's deck, or the 2 or 3 of you are like, we want our decks to be like that caliber and it's more CEDH. Well, go for it. Like, if you guys all want to play at that level, like, great. However, keep in mind, if you do go to play at other places like a local game shop and you're used to playing that caliber of deck, and you go and sit down and this guy's pulling out a deck that is, it's a bird deck, but it only has swan birds
Again
in it.
with
Like,
the hate on the bird decks.
it's only swan birds that are, flying at a 90-degree angle. Like,
Yeah.
it's like a really weird deck. Like, yeah, you're going to pub stomp that guy every single day of the week, So
Yeah.
just keep in mind, like, when you're doing stuff with your pod and you're doing and building decks that way, if you go to conventions or you go to other local game shops and you go to play with other people, they might not play that way. They might play, I'm going to steal all your stuff, and you're like, well, no, we don't ever do that. Like, we don't steal each other's cards and play other people's, or we don't do more than 5 counters in a deck, or we don't do infinite combos. Like, just keep in mind that that's your pod, and you're going to a different place, and so you might not have a deck that other people, or you're not used to playing against those other decks other people are doing. So when you discuss that with your pod and your meta of your group of friends that you're going to play with the most frequently, just keep in mind there's other people.
It
out
also
there
might
too.
be helpful to focus on yourself more. Like, instead of, so this is just advice for everybody, because we'll have less issues if people are like, hey, I don't like Cyclonic Rift, so I don't play Cyclonic Rift. But that rule is for me. If someone else plays Cyclonic Rift, that's fine. But I don't put it in my deck because
I'm
I
like
think
that
it's too
with
powerful.
extra turns.
Yeah.
I will not play them. If you play one,
Yeah.
that's fine. If you play a deck all built around it, please let me know, because I will step out of that game and say, thank you anyway, I'll go somewhere else.
Right. But if you don't know and it comes up and someone starts putting on extra turns, you're not going to whine and cry about it. You're just going to be like,
gotta deal with
okay.
it, or scoop or whatever.
Right. Can you win? You probably ask the question, can you win right now? Tell me how you're going to win. Okay, you told me, great. Let's start another
And
game.
that's my thing too. If they're going to do it and they say, okay, well, now I'm going to chain 5 extra turns together and I'm going to win this way, and we can just talk it out. Don't make me sit there for 5 turns
Yeah.
while you draw, play a learn, move to land, move
I
to your
hate
next
that,
turn.
yeah.
Draw, play a land, move to. No, just tell me what you're doing to get to the win.
Unless
right.
it's use 3, because then I got to flip coins. I can kill myself.
Right. Well, then that's different too. But even you don't abuse extra turns. I have literally played against decks, dirtling, slow,
Yeah, Narset.
plodding decks that are just filled with extra turns. But
Right. Yeah, that's
I do
always
not
rough.
want to play in that game. Thank you anyway. I appreciate the effort, but I'll sit somewhere else.
Yeah, same thing with chaos sometimes. But again, focus. That's you're doing the right thing. You're saying I don't do these things, so I happen to end up in a game like that. I'm not going to ruin the experience for the other person. They might have spent 6 months.
If I have counter spells, I'll ruin it for the
They-
other person.
They might have spent 6 months saving up for that deck, buying all those extra turn spells.
Right.
And I will enjoy countering each and every one.
Which there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of the game. But the
Right.
problem is when you counter them and then you go, see, you deserve that because
No, yeah.
you're not following some unwritten rule that that person had no way of knowing. It's
I mean,
like,
here's
it's
the problem, and
ridiculous.
this is why I'd rather sit out than counter all their extra turns, because they can get salty then and be like, well, you didn't counter their, board
spend
wipe
them all
4
on
turns
you.
again. No, I was saving it for your extra turns, dude.
You Nimrod.
Yeah, no, that's 100% right. Someone's like, why are you just focusing on me? Because you're a stacks player, and I don't want to get staxed. It's like, well, that's not fair. Well, I mean, life isn't fair. It's my cards. I get to decide what I target and what I think is a threat, and that happens to be a threat to me. Just like for you, extra turns are the big threat.
Right.
Whereas I would go, I don't care, take an extra turn where you can get an extra land.
So these are the types of things you need to talk about
Yeah.
with your meta when you're figuring out how
Yeah.
to play together. And the other thing you'll have in a meta is sometimes play will get stale. I've seen your decks. I've seen what you built. You tend to do the same thing. I am very, I am control. I have a few decks that aren't, but most of my decks are blue control.
Yeah.
Some form of blue and maybe some other colors control.
Yeah.
Different themes on the same topic, So a way to shake that up is make some challenges. How about I build a deck? We all build decks for each other. Or we all build decks and we draw the hat which deck we play.
Or
Yeah.
switch decks.
Yes.
We've done that a couple times. Like
Yeah.
you just play my deck, I'll play your
Yeah.
deck.
Or we did a $25 build challenge, which I brought that to my other meta, and Andrew still loves it. He's brought that to other metas.
Yeah, it was
but
a
we
lot
all
of
did
fun.
it. We all had
Yeah.
a good time with it. You know, there's things you can do to make it, you know.
But even in that, we had to talk it out because remember, like you would think a $25 deck would you'd be fine. You can build whatever you want. Well, as it turns out, if you build like Flicker, you know, with Brago, $25 doesn't matter.
Nope.
It's still no fun for anyone else.
Nope.
And then the other one was Feather the Redeemed, right?
Yeah.
Also not fun. So you not only do you have to limit to $25, but you might go $25 and not these commanders.
Right. Urza at $25 is
Yeah,
still
Urza.
Urza.
Still
it's
gross.
Still gross. So gross.
You just have to talk a lot, and that's okay. And then if things don't go your way, man, look, life, your real life is where you get your value, your happiness. It's where you get your contentment. Don't get it from this game because you will lose most of the time.
Yeah.
Most of the time when you're playing Magic, if you're an amazing player, you're winning more than 50% of the games. Most of the time, you're losing.
Yeah.
Because you're playing so many games. And there are 5 people. So out of 5 people, you're not going to win 50% of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too, I would say is like when it comes to like trying to figure out your meta for your pod and stuff like that, one of the other things you could do that's fun is like, hey, let's limit it to only 4 mana rocks and, 10 counters. And then you can do anything else what you want to own, but you only have,
Oh, yeah, that's a lot of fun to put those limitations in
yeah,
there.
so that way you know for a fact, okay, well, I've seen 2 of his counters or 3 of his counters. I know we only have 10, so he's got to be getting low, or so you could even do things like that where it's not even so much like don't play those cards. It's only like, hey, let's only play so many of them in our decks, and let's see who can then come out on
You
top.
guys
for
talked
that.
about that the $25 deck we did. I think we recorded one, but it never made it out.
Right.
Yeah,
Because we didn't
just
record
wasn't
it
good
well.
enough.
Whoops. But the $25 deck, and then I also did it on. He was a monk,
Yep.
a blue
the
white.
prowess.
But I also said every card had to be like Asian
themed.
in some sense.
Yeah.
And that's right when they came out with the
Kawagima,
Yes.
Japanese alternate art.
No, yeah. So the interesting thing was he
Kamigawa.
had
I don't know
what-
how you get that
what's
every
the
wrong.
ability
know,
on the
man.
monk that says they get more
Prowess.
powerful prowess?
Proud.
So
He
really,
just said it.
well, but I
Remember
don't
when we
listen to
talked
him.
about listening? He was not talking about
Yeah,
himself.
just in general, we shouldn't listen to him in general.
All by myself.
That was well done.
Thank you.
So it has prowess. So you really want to play a lot of these low cost instants while giving yourself this thing where every card has to be Asian themed. There aren't that many. So you've
Yeah.
really.
And he really limited himself because with the Japanese art cards with the Japanese writing, he had no idea what they did.
Yeah, so
was
he
so
literally
annoying.
had his phone the entire time out, and he's like, "What's this picture look like? It's this one, I think."
But
Yeah, that's the right one. And he
But
reads
that
it. We're
deck
like, oh my
that
gosh.
had more limitations than anyone else, it still won, but it didn't win because of the instance. It was all just figuring out how to strategize
Right.
your way through.
And again, it's so, and I think that's part of the fun is like when you do put these limitations on yourself, you go and discover new things,
That's
right?
right.
You find cards that you've never seen before, or you play things you didn't think of. And I think that's one of the fun things when you kind of build like that on purpose is like, it's like, okay, cool. I'm going to go look for these. It's like, I didn't even know this card existed. This is actually perfect for this deck.
So here's a really interesting thing about people. So if you take kids and you stick them in an open field, and this is true for
And
adults
then you
too.
drive away.
Yeah, that's called abandonment. You'll probably go to jail. But no, if you put kids in an open field and you say, go play, they'll all play in one small group in the middle of the field and they won't venture out. But if you put them in a large playground that has a fence, as soon as that fence exists there, they'll start going and climbing on the fence because they understand the boundary and it actually opens up creativity. So sometimes we think by putting these boundaries, you're tapping down my creativity, but you're actually increasing it. So it can be a lot of fun to do that in your group.
Right. I agree.
Yeah. So, try it out, when you're building or getting a pod put together for the first time and you guys are just kind of fleshing out your decks, like that Duncan said, definitely play a lot. I mean, we've played decks before 10, 15 times in a row. And I know I have before I start making adjustments just to make sure, okay, it's not doing what I want it to, or it is doing what I want it to, or it's kind of doing it, but I need to do it a little bit better. So, don't think you're going to play one game with this new deck you built and know exactly how it works.
Right. The other thing I'd say about your meta, right? So, okay, you build your meta, you guys work on it as a team, you come together, you find your play style, you find your power level, make a few decks, you guys are having fun. Go to your local game shop, or if you guys can afford to all maybe go to a convention that's local, go and play with other people because you're going to see such cool things that you
Yeah.
never thought of.
That's right. Yeah.
When you only play in one meta, it's fun, but you're missing out on. There are things people do that you would never have thought of. It's a different. You need that input.
You need to get got because like you're like we don't play graveyard hate because like no one has graveyard decks. Like we talked about that last episode. You were like, we don't have black green decks. It's like we don't. So you go to a convention, you're just gonna get got by graveyard decks, and that's hilarious.
Right. Yeah. I got one black green deck, and I just built it for Schmiegel, and that's the only one I used to have.
And it's definitely not really a graveyard deck.
No, it has the recursion, but yeah, it's steal your lands.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that's good.
Yeah, but that's my point. Like if you only play in your one meta, you're gonna miss out on all these other things. Find out other play styles. And you guys maybe had developed a play style or a power level, and you guys all go play against some other people, and you'll say, man, did you see that? Those guys that were playing the like higher power or the lower power stuff, that seemed like a lot of fun. Well, when we started, and then you inject that in it, and your games just get more diverse.
Yeah.
You get more deck ideas, you get more things injected into your own meta,
Right.
which you then take back and have even more fun with your own meta.
Yeah.
So I think that's super important too.
And show up at those places with some different levels of decks too. Like
If you
probably
can.
don't show up.
Yeah, if you can. If you don't have 15 decks or 45 decks like these two jabronis do,
80
I mean,
something.
80 something.
I don't
I
have
think
that
that's up 10 from the last time I talked to you, which was yesterday.
Well, you don't. Okay, so even if you can't afford multiple decks, have some cards you can take in and out
Right.
to lower or up the power level.
That's a
you
good
could
idea, too.
probably
Yeah.
afford to do that.
You know, it's called sideboarding. It doesn't really happen in Commander, but that is kind of what that is. It's called sideboarding. So you just kind of, what I've done is when I'm building a deck, if I have it put together, but there's a bunch of cards I think are going to be good for it, I'll just put them in like a little case for like sleeves or whatever that I have laying around the house, and I'll bring them with me. So that when I'm playing at the shop, I'm like, okay, this isn't doing as good as I think it is. I don't think this card's doing what I want it to. I'll just go in my little box right there with the cards in it, and I'll look through. All right, I'm going to take this one. I'm going to put this. I'm going to try it now and see if
This card
helps.
didn't work. I'm
This
taking
card,
it out.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
even doing that, like
Well,
having
and
that with you
that's
is
certainly
nice
a
too.
thing you can do too.
Right.
Like Mana Rocks would be a very easy thing if you play the 0 drops, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You play a little bit higher power. Okay, well maybe bring along a bunch of 2 drops.
Yeah.
The talismans, the Mind Stone, the
Yeah, a
stuff
cultivate,
Arcane Signet.
Kodama's Reach.
you
Yeah,
put in
like
some
even
of
go to
that,
the 3 level
And if you're
one.
going to be playing with somebody lower power, you just swap them out real quick.
Right.
That is a great idea on how to be able to play at different power levels and not have.
And
to
you
have a
can
different
afford
deck.
that because
Well,
making your deck weaker is cheap.
If you have those 0 drops, you probably can afford it, or you're playing proxies.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You've talked to me about
So-
some people that save for a long time to buy that one deck. So
That's
I
true.
guess,
That's
yeah.
true. It does happen. But so that's kind of our feelings on metas. How do you forge it? How do you craft it? How do you get all on the same page?
I don't know if you guys can notice, but I'm sliding more and more down on this chair. So at some point, I'm just going to be laying on the ground.
We prefer you down
do
there.
You, man. But so that's a way to kind of start how to build. Sloan, do you have any pro tips for beginners?
Yeah, it's actually funny. I thought of this and I didn't realize that we were going to talk about, the end step interaction, because today's pro tip is
that's
learning a
hilarious.
turn order in Magic. So this is the order in which things happen on a turn in Magic. So from top to bottom, there's actually a really helpful guide here I found online that kind of writes it all out, and it even has little lightning bolts where you can play instances.
Can we put that link in the podcast?
Yeah, I can definitely upload this. We'll put it on the Discord server, as well as we'll put it on our website as well, so that way you can look at commanderspod.com. So this is just basically the phases and what happens in each phase of a turn order, and it kind of tells you what can interact where. And this is important, kind of going back to what we were talking about on how cards interact as you move through a turn and when you should and shouldn't do things to make sure you're getting the most value out of them. So you have beginning phase, which is going to be your untap, upkeep, draw. Upkeep and draw are the two first instances on a turn in which you can interact at instant speed. So once the turn starts and you untap, no one can do anything during untap, but then during your upkeep, you're going to effects such as pay 1 life, draw a card, or look at the top card of your library. So if you want to put it on the bottom, top or bottom, that all happens before your draw step in the beginning phase. So you have untap, upkeep, draw, and then you're going to go to your pre-combat main phase, or first main phase, as some people call it. This is where you can play lands, you can play creatures, you can do sorceries, enchantments, artifacts, planeswalkers that don't have flash or some way of being instant speed, obviously.
Well, you
which
can still play those too.
you can still play those
those
too,
don't
but
care when you play.
those don't care when you play them. So anything that's instant speed, you can also play in this segment, the pre-combat main phase. Followed by the next thing, we're going to go into combat. So combat is actually broken up into sections, which is where a lot of confusion happens sometimes in Magic on when
Right,
you're
and we
going to
did a
interact.
segment on
And
that.
we did a segment on that in a previous episode. I think it was 5 or 6. So
Just watch them both.
just watch them
to
all.
them both.
Listen to
Just
them.
watch them all, listen to them all. You can watch them, the screen as the bar goes across too, I guess, technically.
That's a lot of fun sometimes.
It is. So you have beginning of combat, declare attackers, declare blockers, first strike damage, end of combat. In all of those instances of the combat phase, the only one you can't do an instant is damage. So when damage is being resolved, not first strike damage, when normal damage is being resolved, nothing can happen in that instance. It's
Right.
just going to happen.
You have
boom.
to say before damage is dealt.
Yes.
If you want to interact.
And that's true too of everything else. So if someone says I'm going to my combat phase and you need to do something in the pre-combat phase, like this person skips their combat phase, you need to do that pre-combat main phase before they declare I'm now in my attack step.
Right.
So they declare they're moving.
I'm
to
moving to my
and then
combat
you
phase,
may-
and then you would interact.
It goes
with
around in turn order, right?
And
Priority.
Just real quick, another like pro tip here. I'm going to inject there.
Yeah.
Don't declare who you're attacking before you declare you're moving to combat,
right.
because you've already tipped off the person. Maybe they weren't going to stop you, but now you told them
Yeah.
that you're going to attack you.
Now you tilted your hand a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. And then
Yes.
and then so then we're gonna go to the post-combat main phase. So this is going to be the same thing as the pre-combat main phase. You can play lands, play creatures, sorceries, enchantments, planeswalkers, and artifacts, and again, of
All
course,
the stuff from the
instances.
first one.
All
Yeah.
the stuff from the first one you can do in this one as well.
So nice, we do it twice.
Right, and the thing that's interesting about this is there's sometimes things you want to do in this step. Like for example, there might be some lands, or you want to put something out, or you want to cast something after this in regards to, because it's better that you get the hit through, because then when you put it in the second main phase, it still triggers because it sees that hit happening, even though it wasn't on the board when it happened. So sometimes not casting on the first phase is better because then maybe they won't block. Oh, it's just a 1/2. But
Well,
then you put in a benefit.
I often will wait till my second main to do a lot of stuff because
Right.
I want to wait and see, how did combat go? Did it go the way I thought? Do I
100%.
still want this? out?
Right.
Yep.
So, kind of going back again to managing your resources, like we talked about in a previous episode, knowing maybe I shouldn't cast this in my pre-combat, maybe I'll wait till my post-combat main phase. So, and then you have your end phase, which is what we discussed a little bit earlier, which is your end step and then your cleanup step. Your end step, you can do instant speed stuff. The cleanup step, like you were mentioning,
You're not doing anything.
You're not
You're
doing
just
anything.
discarding
the
cards.
game, the everything stops and halts. It's like split second, I guess is a good way to put it, when you can't interact until the split second stuff resolves. So cleanup is that instance where nothing's happening. So that's what you're looking at when you look from top to bottom from a turn. There's also player mats that you can get, and you can even order custom mats that have this stuff on there if you're a newer
Yeah,
player. I would
those are
highly
very
encourage.
helpful. Yeah.
They're very helpful. They have a place for your exile, for your command zone, your
No,
library.
Sloan is a good
your
player.
graveyard.
I'm not digging him by saying this. He still uses it, and it's not because he doesn't know.
Yeah, I mainly use it because I like the way it's actually set up and broken up. It actually has a spot for your lands. It has a spot for your main board, the combat zone, the exile. And then the other thing is too, is it has the stuff in the turn order. So if someone does say something, I'm like, excuse me, sir, you're in this spot. You're not in this one, just so you
Yes.
know. But it's really nice because it breaks the board up and it kind of segments it, and which is nice. And
Segmates it.
Yeah,
segments
segmates.
it. Yeah, mates all
Nailed
over the
it.
segs. That sounded weird. But yeah, so you got so things like
Well,
that
if you
are very
have lots
helpful.
of segs, you're mating, right?
That's true.
I guess that's weird. So it's probably a sliver thing.
Yeah, definitely. So, but that's, so just knowing the turn order and knowing when you can do things and how things break down in the turn order. Remember, there's sub points inside every point. So main phase has a sub points, a combat has sub points. So just keep
Just
that in
take a
mind.
look at the thing we link on
Yep,
the podcast.
we're gonna link it. We're gonna put the
And
picture up
there's
there for you guys.
3 articles going through all of this and when you can do stuff. And
Yeah.
Cool.
So that's a good one. So thanks for joining us, everyone, today. We really appreciate it. We want to thank Jack May at Info Pilgrims for editing and producing. You can email us at cast@commanderspod.com. You can check us out at commanderspod.com. Check out our Patreon. All Patreons get Discord access, so you can check us out on Discord. You can interact with us, talk to us, and As always, everyone, kill Andrew first.
Yes, sir.
This
Thank
is
you.
Jeff signing off from the floor.